Good morning, church. Once again, it's great to be with you this Sunday morning, and it's always a pleasure to be able to share the Word of God with you. And as you all know, that we have been covering book of Ecclesiastes the last few weeks, and we've been looking at all the sayings of the preacher in book of Ecclesiastes. Some people believe that this is a book of pessimism, and while others disagree and say, yes, there's so much pessimism in there, but still there is hope in that book. So what we're going to do today, we're going to bring it all to the conclusion and wrap it up. And I'm going to speak to you from the last 3 chapters of the book. To start with, we know that from the first garden, the Garden of Eden, from the time man and woman got kicked out of God's garden, we have come a long way. Mankind have made great discoveries and scientific advancements and achievements. We have sent rockets to the space, and we have put men on the moon. But, however, life's quest still remains the same. The fundamental question is, what is the meaning of life? This is not a new question. This is a question that mankind has been trying to find answer for all of our lives. And that's what the preacher is doing in book of Ecclesiastes. And in fact, he said he applied himself and he observed life under the sun. He did not withhold anything from him. He kind of tried everything that could be tried on to find meaning in life. So, and then he says throughout this book, vanity, vanity, meaningless and meaningless. And that's why some people say this is a book of pessimism. But it's not entirely correct. That's not all what he is saying. When he looked into life, he recognized that life under the sun is futile. We all agree with that. Life is futile. The reason is because no matter how wise you are, how rich you are, how educated you are, you face the same end as a man who is not wise or fool, who is not educated, who is very poor, who could be homeless or have nothing absolutely. But it doesn't matter which category you fall into. We all reach the same end point. And that's why he is saying it's vanity. So what do? Do we just throw up our hands in the air and say, okay, that's it, no point? So just like Richard Dawkins said a few years back, God doesn't exist, so and therefore enjoy life. So go and do whatever you want to do. Is that how we live? No, that's not how we're supposed to live. And that's what the preacher is saying. He reached the the conclusion that life is meaningless, life is vanity. But that's not the whole story. And he's saying there is more to it. For example, he's saying, even though life is futile, that we can live the life in the best possible way, in the correct way, as God has intended life to be lived. In chapter 10, he talks about how foolish decisions could completely destroy a life that lived wisely. In chapter 10, verse 1, he says, dead flies make the perfumer's ointment give off stench. So a little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. So what he's saying is, no matter how wisely you have lived your life, how honorable lifestyle you have lived, if you just do one absolute foolish thing, you make a decision, it's going to ruin all the things that you've done. That's true. That's one of the things that he has observed in life. And also he's talking about how foolish things is got consequences, no matter how wise we are. And he says in verse 8, he who digs a pit will fall into it. That's something that we talk about. Sometimes we use that. And when we try to catch other people, and we try and scheme and try to get someone into trouble or something, we might end up in that. What we try to do to others, we might end up that coming back, boomerang, back to us. And that is a foolish thing. And then he talks about also how if an axe is blunt, then we have to, whoever uses the axe, have to use lots of force and energy to cut a tree down. So what he's saying again there, the purpose of that picture is that if you're foolish, that foolish decisions have consequences, no matter how wise you have lived so far. So we need to continue to live our lives wisely. But wisdom in itself, it's not enough. The preacher is not kidding himself. He understands that because he himself said wisdom has its own limitation. We read in chapter 6, verse 12. This is what, let's read actually, in fact, chapter 1, verse 18. This is what he said. For in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. And he's saying, he's being honest in his quest of finding meaning of life. And he's saying even wisdom has its limitations. The more wise you are, the more you are likely to feel sometimes sorrowful, because you search and search and search. Sometimes you might find there is emptiness in there. Not all the wise people are happy people. And then he moves on to say that in chapter 11, we are not only supposed to live wisely, we need to be aware that we are not in control of our lives. We read in chapter 11, verse 5, he says, as you do not know the way the spirit comes to the bones in the womb of a woman with child, so you do not know the work of God who makes everything. Nobody knows how a human being is being formed in the womb, and at which point does the flesh become spiritual or have the soul. We don't know. It's a mystery. So what the preacher is trying to say here is we do not know everything. We are not in control of our lives. So if we are not in control of our lives, if life is futile, then what do we do with these lives? How do we find meaning? First of all, he says, enjoy the good things in life. We read that in chapter 3, verse 12 and 13. Chapter 3, verse 12 and 13. And he's saying, I perceive that there is nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Also that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in all his toil. This is God's gift to man. And he's saying, God's gift to man in this futile life is that we do good and we enjoy the good things that God has given us. In the midst of all of this pessimism, we must learn to enjoy the good things, no matter how small they are, no matter how big they are. Rather than being focused on the pessimistic things, we need to focus on the good things in life and enjoy it. And the next thing he's saying in chapter 11, what we see is that he encourages the readers not to procrastinate. Procrastination is not a good thing. I personally know that very well because I like to leave things to the last minute. So let's read some scriptures in chapter 11. And first it says, verse 3, if the clouds are full of rain, they empty themselves on the earth. And if a tree falls to the south or to the north, in the place where the tree falls, there it will lie. He who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap. So what he is saying, if you are waiting for the perfect condition, you will not do anything. Lots of people have missed good things in lives because they missed the opportunities. They were waiting. Do you have regrets in your lives? I have some. Some of you may not agree with me, and I have come across people who say that I have absolutely no regret in my life. And I find it hard to believe. I mean, you're free to disagree with me. When someone says I have no regrets, what they're saying is that every single decision that I have ever made, it's okay. There's nothing to feel sorry about it or say, oh, that wasn't right. I can honestly say, I have made decisions that I look back and I wish if I could go back and change it, I would. So what he is saying is, because of that, some people just wait. They don't want to make the mistakes, and they wait, and they miss opportunities. So he's saying, in other words, don't procrastinate. That doesn't mean we make hasty decisions. That's not same as being foolish and reckless. That's not what the preacher is saying. I'm not encouraging anyone to make hasty, reckless decisions. We need to be wise. I've already talked about it. But that decisions need to be made in trust, in faith, in hope, believing God. Not there won't be a perfect condition. There might be some, but we don't come across perfect condition all the time. And let's move on a little bit further, what this preacher is saying here. And he is saying the next thing he's saying is, death is coming. Death is coming to everyone. And therefore he's saying, we need to remember God in our youth. In chapter 12, verse 1, remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come, and the years draw near, of which you will say, I have no pleasure in them. So the preacher is encouraging that everyone remembers God in their youth. Now, why? Before I answer that question, let me explain something about remembering. When he says remembering, he doesn't mean a mental note saying, okay, I'm going to remember God. I'm remembering, I'm praying. No. When he says remember means actively involving God in the things that we do, in our decision, in our actions, in our practical lifestyle. We involve God. God becomes part of our life. That's what he means. Because there will be a day. The days are coming, he's saying, the days that we will not enjoy. I'll read it again. And he's saying, remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come and the years draw near, of which you will say, I have no pleasure in them. A day is coming where we will not enjoy life as we do now. When you are young, when you've got so much youth, there's so much energy, so many things that we want to do. Everything seems like fun and we feel like we're going to live forever. But when the old age comes, things will change. And he talks about old age quite a lot, about blossom tree. And then he talks about the grasshopper dragging itself. Grasshoppers don't drag themselves normally. They normally catapult them, and they have wings, they can fly. But what do they normally do? They normally catapult themselves and then fly. That is their main way of escaping the predator. If we convert it in human terms, that would mean I would be able to jump from one end of football pitch to the other end. That's how far a grasshopper can jump, catapult. So what he is saying here is, when a grasshopper get to a point where it can no longer catapult itself, it will be a drag. We all gonna reach at some point that stage where we don't have the energy, we don't have the strength, we can't do the things that like we used to do. And he's saying, don't wait until then. Remember God when you are young. Because if we remember God when we are young, the decisions that we will make will be less regrettable later on in life. And those decisions will be pleasing unto God. So remember God when you are young. Next thing, what the preacher is saying, that God will bring everything into judgment. Chapter 11, verse 9. And he said, rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and the sight of your eyes. But know that for all these things, God will bring you into judgment. And he's saying, you live however you want in your youth. That's fine. Enjoy life. There's nothing wrong with it. But remember, God will bring everything to judgment one day. Whether it's good or bad, God will bring them into judgment. And we will face the judgment day one day. In chapter 12, we read in verse 13, "The end of the matter all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil." No matter what kind of deeds they are good or evil, God will bring them all into judgment. There is hope in judgment, friends. Remember, the people who have cheated justice on this earth, like Hitler, like Stalin, like Pol Pot, all these people who committed evil crime, killed millions of people, they escaped the arm of justice here on this earth, on this side of life. They escaped it, but they will not escape the judgment of God. This is hope. God will not let any injustice go unpunished. But at the same time, God will bring good things also into judgment and bring it to light. So we must remember God. We need to act accordingly. And he is saying the commandments. So fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Finally, he comes to the end. He comes to the conclusion and he's saying the end of man is that we must fear God and keep his commandments. Now, what is God's commandment? We all know God's commandment first. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. Second, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Now, also we could go back to the Old Testament in Micah 6:8. The prophet is saying, he actually prophesied and said, Son of man, God has already revealed it to you. It is one thing that God requires of you. What is that? Do justice, love mercy, walk humbly with God. Do justice, love mercy, walk humbly with God. We always, as children of God, stand up for justice. That is the purpose here on this earth and life. We should love people and we should show mercy. When people don't deserve, we show them kindness. Finally, we must walk humbly with God. We should have humility in our lives. For by grace, we are saved. It's not our own deeds. So finally, the book of Ecclesiastes comes to an end, to a conclusion. So even though life is futile, even though we all meet the same end, still there are things in life that we can enjoy. The good things God has given us. We need to act wisely. We shouldn't procrastinate. We make the decision trusting God. And in all of our youth, we involve God and make God part of our life and our youth. And we keep his commandments and we fear God. And this is what the preacher in the book of Ecclesiastes comes to at the end. And this is the end of the matter. And I hope this series has been a blessing to you. May God bless you and have a great day.